Peter Moore is one of only 4 men to have won Brownlow medals at 2 clubs, Collingwood and Melbourne. He was the most spectacular player of his day, a 198cm ruckman forward who could run like the wind, mark in packs and win his own ball at ground level. In one of the most sensational stories in VFL-AFL history, he and Footscray's Kelvin Templeton crossed to Melbourne after the 1982 season in a $1 million package deal. Welcome to Open Mic, Peter.
Thanks, Mike.
Where does your heart sit these days?
Oh, with both clubs. I mean, I'm probably more involved at Collingwood because I played there longer, but certainly, you know, I'd really like to see Melbourne get it together and start being competitive, so I follow them both.
Most blokes tend to go back to the original home when they finish, don't they? When they've had
so,
two
yeah. I think, well, you start as a kid there, and you know, there's a long history there, and so it's probably the club that's more significant for me anyway.
It all started when you were 17 at Collingwood?
Yes.
You started in the seniors late in the 1974 season under Neil Mann?
Yes.
What were your instructions? What were his instructions to you?
Well, my first game was an accident, really, because Twiggy Dunn tripped down the stairs Saturday morning and I got called up.
What, at Vic Park or at home?
No, at home.
Yeah, okay.
And I got a late call and sat on the bench at Arden Street for 3.5 quarters and just came on in the last 10 minutes when we were 10 goals down, and I ran around and got a few kicks. I just said, get a kick, so I ran around getting a kick and did that, and did enough to get a game the following week, and then I think I played a couple of finals that year. So.
You did play 2 finals, one a win over the Bulldogs at Waverley, and then the second one in front of 87,000 people at the MCG against Hawthorn. I did a stats check, Maury, and you had 1 kick. Now, you must have spent a lot of time on the bench.
Probably injured early. I was on the bench, or I got injured earlier.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't a distinguished day.
But it's young, isn't it? I mean, now 17-year-olds can't play anymore.
No, they're not allowed to, I guess. But when in that year at Collingwood, we had myself, Rene Kink was 16 when he played, Billy Picken was 16 or 17. You know, so we were all there together at the same time. At one stage there were, 3 or 4 17-year-olds in the team. There's
yourself and Kelvin Templeton. You were captain of Collingwood. He was captain of Footscray, now the Western Bulldogs. You were both Brownlow medalists from the previous 3 years, and you moved in a package deal. I mean, what was the origin of that? Whose idea was it?
Well, it was my manager was my accountant and my lawyer, who happened to be Jeff Brown, who's now the head of Channel 9. Yeah. So Jeff was a young lawyer getting into sports, and they just put a deal together to package us up. I don't know, they must have thought of it. And
who's they? They being Brownie and who else?
And David Sheahan, my accountant.
Okay,
and we had the same
Seddon,
accountant.
Was Dick Seddon
Dick was involved, yes. Yeah. Dick was involved, and Barassi, and I guess they needed to recruit, some big name players, and they put a deal to us, and it took a fair while to decide, but finally decided to do it.
That's 30 years ago, correct?
That's right, yeah.
The deal, as I understand it, was that you both got 500 grand for 3-year contracts at Melbourne.
I think it was 5 years. I think it was a bit more than 500.
It was 5. Yeah. More money and a longer period, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, how's your memory? What was
not very good. It was a big deal for the day, though. It was a very big deal.
Massive deal.
It was a cloak-type deal.
And I still say that's the biggest story that I've ever written, that story. It just seemed, you couldn't believe that it could possibly happen. And I remember when the story broke in the Old Herald, it was just ridiculed all around town because people said that can't happen.
Couldn't happen, yeah. Well, it was interesting because Collingwood, there was no financial issue. They would have matched, they were prepared to match any sort of a deal that Melbourne would do. I just was disillusioned with where the club was at. It was in total disarray politically. I mean, the club was upside down, and then they went through subsequently a period of pretty poor sort of performance. So, yeah, it was unfortunate. Looking back now, to be a one-club player would be ideal. I would have loved to have played my whole career at Collingwood. I probably should have, perhaps, if I'd been...
Should have? What, because it would sit more comfortably with you?
I would have preferred to have, yeah. And sometimes you're young, you make decisions that if you're a bit more experienced and you had a bit more advice around the place, you might not have made that decision. So it was... yeah, it was a situation. I don't think it could happen today. I mean, I think the players are too well advised. They've got plenty of mentors and people around to help them make those decisions. And but it's still.
Well, when you say it couldn't happen, I mean Gary Ablett went north basically for the money. Travis Cloak, all the conjecture about what he might do because there's so much. He's such a hot property and so much money available. So I think players can still go if they want to, if they find the offer attractive.
Well, you know, the issue, I guess, with Gary was that he'd played in premierships, he'd won Brownlows and won Best and Fairest, and he was worth his peak value at that point in time. So it was a once-off opportunity that, you know, he felt that he should take, and seems to be enjoying it. So, you know, it's hard. I mean, the loyalty issue is difficult in football because you are loyal to the team and the guys you play with and the group you're with, and that's really all that holds players, not so much the club. They really are more loyal to the group they play with, and that's how these good clubs hang on to their players, because the peer group is pressure to stay is pretty strong, and that's probably what will keep Travis. Hopefully, will keep him at Collingwood.
Now, you won 101 of 172 games with Collingwood, and then went to Melbourne and won 25 of 77. Do you or did you ever regret the move to Melbourne?
I didn't regret the move, because Melbourne was great for me, and the people were great, and the club was very welcoming, and you know, and we had a good bunch of guys there. Jared Healy was playing there, and Robbie Flower, and all these sort of terrific fellas. So I enjoyed it. But I guess what you don't understand is when you're in a successful club, and I was lucky to be there during the Hafey era at Collingwood. You know, we won just about most of our games, and so I was the first, apart from the Murray-Weideman period where we didn't win. As soon as Tommy got there in '77, we won pretty much most of our games every year and played in the finals every year. So to go to a club where you have an expectation that you can help that club to achieve that kind of performance, it just didn't happen, unfortunately, at Melbourne. And so you get the football from the other perspective. It's Collingwood's like, you know, being in a rock star. You know, it's a huge club. Therefore,
which raises the question: why make the move? Was it money driven?
No, it wasn't money driven. It was related to well, there's a bit of a build up really. We under Tommy Hafey, we played in 5 grand finals in a row, or 5 grand finals in 5 years with the draw. So we made the grand final in 4 of Tommy's 5 years as coach. I played in over 20 finals in that period of time, so we had a lot of success, but we couldn't win one. We couldn't jag one, and when we lost against Carlton in '82, there was a really big acrimonious fallout amongst the players and Tommy and the committee, and the whole club was sort of imploding at that point. And so I was 81 rather, and then '82 it was a disastrous year for the club. I got injured, and then the club sacked Tom halfway through the year, and that was a huge problem, and it was, the players were blamed, I was blamed for being disloyal and all that sort of stuff. So just looked to me like the whole joint was disintegrating, you know, and it was very unstable, and the opportunity came to go to Melbourne and play under Barassi and to have a fresh start and get away from all that, so I decided to do it. But whether I regret it, I don't know. It's the decision I made. And,
there was, you talked about this, the allegation about the senior players moving against Tommy. There was a perception that the senior players had mutinied and had brought about the downfall and almost forced the committee to make the decision to sack Tom. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think it's fair, no. I think that, you know, there were issues after the loss, you know, against
in '81,
and they should have been resolved. And
what are we talking about? Issues
between the players and Tommy. Tommy was very critical of a lot of the players, and the players didn't take that very well. And I thought it should have been resolved then, and it wasn't. And therefore, through the next year, we lost, you know, 8 of the first 9 games or something. So it was when you start losing, it doesn't take long before the drums start beating.
That's true, but we're talking about a football club that had played in 4 grand finals in 5 years, and in the other year finished 3rd. I mean, it seems inconceivable that there'd be disharmony in a football club with that sort of record.
Yeah, I think the losses, the losses were taken so hard by everybody. No one harder than Tom. I mean, he just was devastated at that last loss. So, you know, I think there was just the fallout from that, and the players weren't happy, and he lost the players simply in that period, and he couldn't get it back. So it was all over.
Did you take offence at anything he said to you?
No. Tommy was great to me. I mean, he just let me play my game, and he just encouraged you to play if you're a natural player, and he just let me play my game.
You talked before about being a rock star at Collingwood, and you were, and Peter McKenna was. I remember that first-hand experience.
Well, he actually sang. I never sang.
That was a wise decision of yours.
I just played footy.
How did it feel, and what sort of a jolt was it when you ran out in the Melbourne colours against Collingwood and you were jeered and catcalled? And I think the Collingwood people thought you were a mercenary, didn't they?
Yeah, they weren't happy, and I had never been on the other end of it. You see, I'd always had great support from the Collingwood crowd, and so I got a real first-hand understanding of what it's like to go to Victoria Park and play for the opposition, because they were, you know, they were pretty unkind, one would say, but that's fair enough. You know, that didn't. Oh, it did bother me a bit, but I mean, all you can do is play. But yeah, so it was an interesting reaction.
Brownlows at both clubs, Collingwood and Melbourne. Was one better than the other in your view?
I felt like the 1979 one, I was lucky to win it. I didn't expect to win it. I wasn't tipped to win it. And I always say to Gary Wilson from Fitzroy, whenever I see him, that I've got his Brownlow at home in the cupboard, because he should have won it. I mean, he was a champion player, and he had a great year. But I had a great year and sort of snuck up on him in that year. It was my first year in the ruck under Tommy, and
Len Thompson had left.
Len had left, and I was the #1 ruckman, and I was playing on my own in the ruck, which meant that I just had a lot of game time. You know, I was really fit, and I had a pretty big year, but it took about half a season for people to recognise that I was actually playing well, because I was not very well known at that point as a ruckman. So, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, and probably lucky to win, I would have thought. And then the one at Melbourne, well, when I got to Melbourne, the pressure was on to the extent where really that's the only way that I could really prove myself. If the team wasn't going to win finals, which it didn't seem to be good enough to do, personally I had to, it was a Brownlow or nothing. So yeah, that was a real satisfying achievement, because I really set out to try and have a good enough year to at least be in contention.
Who of the current players can you watch and actually see, like Peter Moore 30 years on in?
Most of the ruckmen are pretty athletic, like Cox and all these sort of guys. I mean, they really are athletic, and I guess, you know...
So would Coxie remind... Do you see a bit of yourself in
he's
Coxie?
bigger than I was. He plays a bit bigger than I did.
Natanui, maybe?
Natanui is athletic. I mean, he seems to have unlimited athleticism, but just doesn't quite know how to use it yet. But when he does, he'll be formidable, I think, as a player. And I suppose Adam Goods when he played in the ruck, but he's more of a ruck rover style player as well. So
now, your teammates, you've a lot of celebrated names amongst your initial teammates. One of them was Phil Carman. I mean, I think for a period of time, Phil Carman might have been the best player in the competition.
Well, people ask me about Phil often, and I reckon he was the best player I ever saw play. You know, for a brief period, probably 2 or 3 years when he was at his peak, but certainly when he came to Collingwood, the Weed had taken over as coach, and we were all there. We had a great group of players, and Twiggy Dunn was still playing, the Richardson brothers, Tomo, Peter McKenna, you know, so it was a great bunch of champions for me to play with. And Fabulous came over, and he was the best thing anyone ever seen. I mean, he was the fittest player I've ever seen, and just a fantastic athlete. Brilliant on both sides of his body. I mean, he had everything. You know, he was unbeatable, really.
You've had, in the main, 2 of the highest profile coaches in the history of football.
Yes.
Hafey largely for a long period at Collingwood, and Barassi at Melbourne. Were there similarities between those two?
The competitiveness was the same. I mean, Tom was a huge competitor, and I think people, you know, Barassi gets big raps because he won a lot of flags, and he was a great coach, and I agree with that. But Tom's a bit probably not as recognised. He took that Collingwood team to play in those 5 grand finals in 4 years. Was a fantastic performance with a really cobbled together team. You know, we didn't have that many stars, and it was a lot of recycled guys that came from Ray Byrne, these sort of guys, great players that came from other clubs, or Mick Taylor from South Australia, people like that, who were terrific players. And so Tom did a great job with that. Barassi was more of a high-profile type, and probably at Melbourne he was, you know, very intense about it, because he was really almost over-coaching, because he felt it was his responsibility to turn that whole thing around. And so it was a pretty intense period with Ron. But I loved Ron, and we got on great, but we were sort of had a bit of a love-hate relationship, I suppose. You know, it was a
What, love-hate while you were playing?
Oh yeah, we used to fire up at each other quite a bit.
And you would give back as good as you got?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. But it was always
Did he ride you hard?
Yeah, he did. He rode all his star players hard. Everybody Robbie Flower, you remember, played out of position for 3 or 4 years. You know, the best winger in history, played most of his game at the back line.
Yeah.
Because Ron believed that's what was the best thing to do, and so he rode Gerard hard. He rode myself.
Gerard Healy.
Gerard Healy, myself.
I want to take you to 1977. I suspect it's the most momentous period in your football life.
Yeah.
Collingwood went from the bottom to the top, a drawn grand final, and you were beaten in the replay by North Melbourne. You kicked 13 goals in those 3 finals that year, and 76 goals for the season. Was that your best year?
Best year as a forward. Yeah, I was always fancied myself as a ruckman, not a forward, and Tomo was still there and very much the dominant presence as our #1 ruckman, and he's a bit loath to give a young guy a run on the ball. He couldn't get a look in those days. So it was Tommy's idea. He saw me take a few grabs in finals and practice matches and that, and Tommy thought that I could be a key forward pocket ruckman, sort of take the odd mark here and there, and so he played me there and just worked the forward line around. In the end, I became the full forward, and I had Rene Kink and Phil Calm, the 3 of us, kind of working the forward line, and it just seemed to work, and I was a pretty good mark, and mostly just bomb it long to the goal square and see if I could mark it.
I know Tommy's haunted by the suspension of Phil Carman during that final series.
Yes.
Do you win the flag if Phil plays?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, particularly the first game. I mean, the draw, the replay, I'm not sure, but they won that by 20 points, I think. We really needed all the sort of star power we could get, and we missed Phil a lot.
You kicked 5 goals in the replay. Were you playing on Denshy or Frankie Gumbleton?
I can't remember, but I generally played on Frank, and Dench would pick up Phil or Renee or somebody like that. Yeah. So I think I was on Frank Gumbleton for most of the time, and then Croswell used to come down if I was getting out of hand. He'd come down and pick me up.
One of my indelible memories from grand finals was Brent Croswell running the length of the MCG straight down what we now call the corridor, from full forward to full back to guard you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think I'd already kicked 5 or so by that point, 4 or 5 goals by that point, and he came down, and I didn't kick another goal after that, but I don't know if the ball came down there either. So I don't know whether Crosby got the credit for shutting me down, or whether the ball never came. But certainly it was a big move, him from full forward, because he was a pretty dangerous player at their end. He was a very good player too. 5
grand finals, 1 draw, 4 losses. How deeply does that cut now, and did it cut back then?
Well, back then it was devastating. I mean, the first couple, I was a young kid, in the 77 finals. I was just happy to be there, and I fortunately played well in both those grand finals. I think I kicked 4 and 5.
9 goals in the 2 of them. 9 goals
in the 2 of them. So I had a good run. So I was really devastated and disappointed, but it wasn't. I was sort of lucky to get there, and then, but then subsequently, 79 and 80, 81, or 80, whatever it was. I can't remember now. But the finals that we lost subsequently, and the final, the one against Richmond where we got thrashed, that was
1980.
80. That was a pretty devastating game for us, and then to lose to Carlton that day was the final one was also.
Now we're talking 1981 when you lost to the Blues.
Yes. You
went into that game, did you not, with a torn hamstring?
Well, I had torn a hammy a couple of weeks before, and it was a pretty significant tear, so I was probably not right, but...
Whose decision was it for you to play?
Well, I wasn't that keen to play. I felt that I couldn't run flat out or bend over properly and pick the ball up, but match committee really decided that, I was our best option deep in the forward line.
And they're going to play you out of the goal square,
I was playing in the ruck at that point, so I couldn't have played in the ruck, so obviously I wasn't fit, but the idea was that I could, play full forward and stay around the goal square and perhaps take a couple of grabs and kick a few goals. So I ended up kicking 1 or 2 goals, so it sort of half worked. The thought process was they were keen for me to play. I was the captain. I thought if I could bluff my way through and kick a couple of goals and we happened to win, at least I'd be in a premiership team.
Yeah. Peter, it's footy folklore that you received your runners-up medallion, MCG, after the 1981 grand final.
I knew you were going to ask me about this.
And threw it away, never to be seen again. Is that true?
Well, I'll have to dispel that rumour, because actually I just pretended to throw it into the crowd, but I actually sort of kept it in my hand.
Is that true?
No. I did throw it away.
And it's never been recovered?
It hasn't, no, I don't know where it is. I've got a couple of them at home, a couple of other ones, but not that one.
You think you had enough to spare, did you?
Enough. Well, that was the whole issue. People said it was a bit unsporting, and maybe it was, but my thought was that I wasn't going to accept coming second ever, you know, that we'd come second enough, and that by accepting the medal it was accepting coming second. So it was more of a symbolic thing as the way I looked at it. But
that was the heartbreak year, wasn't it? That was,
that was the start of the end. That was the start of the end of the Hafey era, actually. Yeah.
So you don't regret that?
No, I regret it because of the fallout, but really, you know, I don't regret the gesture in saying that we didn't want to accept coming second. I was involved at Collingwood when we lost the finals to Brisbane, you know, in 2000, and I saw Mick Malthouse's runner-up medal go straight in the bin too.
Did it really?
You know, look, as a symbolic thing to his team that we don't want this and we don't want to come second. So it's you know, there's no second prize in footy. That's simple as that.
There was a view that your passion was snow skiing, and that as soon as you finished football, it was as if it had never occurred in your life, and you're off in a new direction and skiing as often as you wanted. Is it? Yeah. Did you actually ski while you were playing?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't really allowed to ski during the season.
I know you weren't allowed to, but did you?
I may have been in balaclava with goggles up at Mount Buller. I may have been spotted on occasion, but mostly if I was injured or, you know, if I had a shoulder injury or something, we'd go skiing.
Peter, do you think your reputation, for whatever it is, you think your place in the game would have been different had you won one premiership?
Oh, well, for sure. If we, you know, jagged a couple of those 5 we were in, it would have changed everybody's
but it's funny, isn't it?
Suit in the game. See, you've got to play in premierships to be really remembered.
See, that's a great point. You mentioned Gerard Healy's name. Gerard thinks that's nonsense. Gerard says that a player's reputation is built on what he does over a long period, and that it should be incidental whether, in fact, he's played in premiership teams or not.
I think if you play well in premierships, you know, if you step up and play at your best in the big games and you win, then you know, you go down in history probably in a different way to someone who doesn't. Having said that, I mean, there are a lot of great players that hardly played in a final. You know, Robbie Flower, Gary Wilson, these sort of guys, you know, that just didn't even get to play. So it's really a luck of the draw being in the right place at the right time. So in that sense, Gerard's right. If you're unlucky enough to not be in a team that's good enough, then that's true. But certainly big games in, you know, big performances in big games are what make players' reputations.
Let's move to the present.
Yes.
How are you putting food on the table these days?
I'm sort of involved in resources and
You've always given this answer. I'm sort of involved in resources. What's that mean?
I have a group of partners. We do. Our current project is gold exploration in America, in Nevada. So we've got a number of projects over there, and I run all that.
You run it from Australia?
Yeah, well, I travel a lot, but I run
Have you got gold in the ground, or are you prospecting?
We're prospecting at this stage. We may have some gold in the ground, but we haven't announced it.
So if you don't know you've got gold in the ground, how are you making money out of it?
Oh, well, I'll just do my best, you know.
So it's been a vague answer. A bit of this and a bit of that from you.
Just do what you can.
Yeah. Now, your son, Darcy.
Yes.
Story in the Herald Sun recently. We see him here on the monitor. There you are. He's taller than you, Maury, and you're 6'6".
Actually, I was standing in a hole behind him at that.
Well, it looks like you are.
So he's about the same height as me, yeah.
And he's 16?
He's 16, just 16 this year, yeah. So he's not eligible for the draft till 2014.
But he's eligible, father and son, for Collingwood?
He is for Collingwood, yeah.
Now, being as objective as a parent can be, how do you see his future?
Well, I'm probably a harder judge than most on him, you know, but so far he's done everything right. I mean, he's a good player. He plays very well, very tall, athletic. And,
quick?
Yeah, very quick.
Yeah.
And great hands, and he's plays forward and back, so he's very focused and committed and competitive. So yeah, he's got a good chance if it all goes well.
You weren't inducted into the AFL or the Australian Football Hall of Fame until 2005, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think, and this is a popular view, I mean, Gerard Healy, I think, shares this view. Do you think that you suffer and you don't get the recognition that you deserve for your achievements?
Oh, no, that's really for others to decide. I reckon getting in the Hall of Fame is a bit harder if you played for Collingwood, I think. That's the problem. I think it's a bit harder.
Eddie believes that. Do you believe it, or is it a throwaway line?
I think so. I think it's a little bit of resistance to acknowledging Collingwood players. Well, Eddie wouldn't put me in the Collingwood Hall of Fame until after I got in the AFL Hall of Fame.
There was a reason for that.
Because I left. You see.
Exactly.
You cannot leave Collingwood and have Eddie be happy with you. So.
Peter, it's been great reflecting on what's been an outstanding career in football. Good to see you looking so well, and good luck for the future.
Okay, thanks, Mike.